Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving deep into cognitive biases. Now look, it's not that your brain is broken or anything. It's better to think of these biases as predictable little glitches in a super fast operating system. And understanding them isn't just kind of cool, it's absolutely key if you want to crush that AP Psych exam. So, you ready to take a look behind the curtain of your own mind? Let's do this. So let's just kick things off with a huge and, maybe a little unsettling question. Is your brain lying to you? I mean, really think about it for a second. When you make a snap judgment or some random memory just pops into your head, how can you be 100% sure it's the real story?
Well, the good news is no, your brain isn't some evil mastermind trying to trick you. It's actually just trying to be incredibly efficient. See, to get through the day, our brains have to process millions of pieces of info. So they develop these little mental shortcuts, what psychologists call heuristics. And 99% of the time, they're total lifesavers, but they are also exactly where those glitches start to happen.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to expose those sneaky little shortcuts your brain is using all the time. Then, we'll see how those shortcuts can lead to some really flawed judgments. We'll even get into the wild double standards we have for judging ourselves versus other people. After that, we'll figure out why our beliefs can be so darn sticky. And finally, the most important part, we'll wrap it all up into a killer strategy for exam day. All right, first up, your brain's deceptive shortcuts. We're talking about heuristics here. You can basically think of these as your brain's autopilot settings. They are the quick and dirty rules it uses to make thousands of decisions every single day without, totally crashing the system. They are incredibly useful, for sure, but they are also the root cause of every single bias we are about to cover. So let's meet the two heavy hitters of the heuristic world. Over on the left, we've got the availability heuristic. This one is all about memory. Basically, if you can think of an example easily, your brain assumes it must be super common. And on the right, you have the representativeness heuristic. This is all about matching. You judge something based on how well it fits a stereotype you already have. So get this straight in your head. Availability is about what's easy to remember. Representativeness is about what looks the part. Let's see the availability heuristic in action. Imagine this. Ding dong. Someone's at your front door. What happens? Instantly, your brain flashes back to that super pushy, really annoying salesperson who came by last week. That memory is fresh, it's vivid, it's emotionally charged, it's highly available. So before this new person has even said a word, you're already thinking, ugh, not interested. Your brain just took a shortcut based entirely on what was easiest to remember. Okay, now for the representativeness heuristic. Picture this. You meet someone who's kind of quiet, wears glasses, and is always carrying a book. What happens? Boom, your brain's little search engine just screams librarian. You're matching this person to a perfect prototype. But, and this is the glitch, you've completely ignored the actual statistics. There are way more salespeople or farmers out there than there are librarians. Your brain just went with the stereotype, not the odds. So, these shortcuts, they don't just exist on their own. They're actually the building blocks for much bigger, more systematic errors in how we think. This is where those little glitches start to paint a genuinely flawed picture of reality for us. And the first one up is a real monster, confirmation bias. Let's be real. We all have this deep need to be right. Well, this bias is our brain's little enabler. It's like having a personal butler who only brings you news articles and facts that confirm everything you already believe, while, conveniently hiding away anything that might challenge you. Next up, we have the famous hindsight bias, or as I like to call it, the armchair quarterback effect. After your team wins the big game, it's so easy to sit back and say, oh yeah, I knew they were going to win all along. But did you really? This bias is so sneaky because it actually rewrites our memories of what we thought before, making the world seem way more predictable than it really is. And that makes it almost impossible to learn from our mistakes. Okay, now things get personal. Let's talk about how we judge people. This is all about attribution, how we explain behavior. And what's so fascinating is that our brains have this massive double standard. There's one set of rules for judging other people and a completely different, way more forgiving set of rules for judging ourselves. So when we see someone else trip on the sidewalk, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably something like, wow, that person is so clumsy. We jump straight to a conclusion about their personality. We almost never stop and think, oh, hey, maybe the sidewalk is cracked right there. We blame the person, not the situation. We're focused on who they are, not on what's happening around them. Yep, that's it right there. Someone else is late to meet you. Our brain doesn't think, oh, must be bad traffic. It just goes straight to, they're so irresponsible. It's a character flaw. End of story. But just watch what happens when the tables are turned. When we have to explain our own behavior, a totally different bias kicks in, the self-serving bias. This is basically our brain's personal PR agent. If you totally ace a test, I'm a genius. But if you fail it, the test was completely unfair. Our successes? That's all us. Our failures? Never our fault. See the difference? When it's us who's late, it's never about our character. Oh no, it's always the situation. It was the traffic, my alarm didn't go off, it started raining. There's always an excuse. Understanding this fundamental hypocrisy in our own thinking is a huge concept, not just for the exam, but, for life. All right, so we know our brains make these flawed calls. But what happens when we're shown actual evidence that we're wrong? Do we just change our minds? Well, not so fast. Our brains have these incredibly powerful defense mechanisms that protect our existing beliefs, which makes them super, super sticky. All right, pop quiz time. Take a look at the items here. A candle, a box of tacks, and some matches. Your mission is to figure out how to mount that candle on a wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table below. Seriously, go ahead and pause if you need to. Give it a good think. Having a tough time? You might be experiencing a bias we call functional fixedness. So here's the solution. You empty the tacks out of the box. Use a tack to pin the box itself to the wall, and then place the candle inside it. Boom. The reason this is so tricky is that our brains get fixed on the normal function of things. We see a box, and we can only think container, not shelf. Our creativity gets stuck in a box. Literally. Okay, next up is belief perseverance. This is kind of like the stubborn cousin of confirmation bias, and it's why it's so hard to debunk myths. So imagine someone is convinced a certain vitamin supplement works wonders. You show them a huge scientific study that proves it has zero effect. Belief perseverance is when they just say, well, I don't care what some study says, I know it works for me. They cling to the belief even after the evidence for it has been totally torpedoed. And finally, we've got cognitive dissonance. This is that uncomfortable, kind of squirmy feeling you get when your actions and your beliefs just don't line up. A person knows smoking is bad for them, but they smoke anyway. That creates this mental tension. And since it's hard to change the behavior, what do they do to get rid of that awful feeling? They change their belief. They start telling themselves it's not that bad, or they'll quit later. All right, we've gone through all these kind of mind-bending, maybe even a little scary glitches in our thinking. But now for the part you've been waiting for. How do you turn all this knowledge into cold, hard points on the AP exam, especially on those tricky free response questions? Let's talk strategy. I want you to meet your new best friend for the FRQ. It's the UDA method. Simple, easy, 3 steps. First, U. Underline the term they're asking about in the prompt. Easy enough. Second, D. Define it. Give a quick, clear definition in your own words. But here's the step that actually gets you the points. Third, A. Apply. You absolutely have to apply that definition to the specific story or scenario they give you in the prompt. Just look at this real example from an FRQ. You could write the most perfect textbook definition of cognitive dissonance you've ever seen, and you would still get 0 points for it. The only way to score is to do that A step, the application. You have to connect the dots and explain how that person in that specific scenario would feel that mental tension and what they do about it. Definition is not enough. Application is everything. So I want to leave you with this one last question to chew on. Now that you know about your brain's common little glitches, which of these shortcuts do you see running on autopilot in your own mind? Don't be afraid to really look, because spotting your brain's secret shortcuts isn't just a trick for an exam, it's the first real step to becoming a smarter, more self-aware thinker. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer.